Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to the Sikh Network Show, where we, the Sikh Network team, bring you updates and activities on what the Sikh Network's been doing related to the Sikh Manifesto and the UK Sikh Survey, but also wider issues that are affecting the Sikh community in the UK. Today, we'll be talking to you an issue that wasn't specifically covered in the Sikh Manifesto or the UK Sikh Survey, but it is an issue that is vitally important to Sikhs up and down the UK and actually around the world, and something that's actually quite pressing and worrying for Sikhs in Punjab, and that is public health. Health is important to all of us, and Sikhi teaches us to look after our minds, bodies, and be active. And this is something that Sikhs in the UK have had some troubles with, but also much more publicised Sikhs in Punjab are struggling with today. Today we're going to be talking about the impact of public health and actually what are some of the underlying issues that we have in the Sikh community in the UK and how the Sikh Network, in partnership with other groups, will be looking to tackle this issue going forward. Let me introduce my guest today. I'm delighted to have Ricky Bandal here. Ricky, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Now, Ricky, you've spent many years in public health, and obviously now a recent addition to the Sikh Network team. Tell me a bit about what attracted you to the Sikh Network, given your background and your activities in this field.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for having me on the show. One of the key issues that I found was if you look at stereotypes of Punjabis in general and the Sikh community, we often get labelled with the taglines of doctors and pharmacists and so forth. However, that wasn't still being represented in some of the higher echelons within the healthcare system. And I sort of managed to maybe accidentally find my way in a position of where we were looking at certain subjects. So I started off in the substance misuse field. Right. Growing from the area that I was from, it was quite profound, some of the issues that were around there, around substance misuse. And I started working within the police. Right. And in the police was the first time I tried to find equivalents in terms of influential Sikh, Punjabi background, right. Healthcare professionals. And I was really struggling to find those things. Yeah. And looking at in terms of people who are commissioning services, especially for the Punjabi Sikh community, was a much harder task. And luckily, I mean, I think we bumped into each other a couple of times via social media and et cetera, et cetera. And the Sikh Network in itself found that to be that influential body in terms of looking at professionals within their specialisms, or just people having a general interest in not even being a specialist in that area. But we're a vehicle where you can actually put some of your opinions across and hopefully try and influence policy potentially, and also looking at increasing engagement into those kind of services that people do as well.
Yeah, and this is something that we really was one of the objectives of the Sikh Network, was how do we connect both the youth, younger generations in the UK and young people and the issues they have, and they could be society-wide, not just Sikh-related. The professionals, Sikh professionals, which was a real target or group that we wanted to attract into Panthak affairs, but also the elders, because they've been around a lot longer than us. A lot of the issues, whether they're political, whether they're social, whether they're health-related, they extend to all generations. And one of the benefits of the network was to really connect all three and the wider group. That actually, I think some of the limitations we've seen and some of the advantages I guess we have is that we have that interaction and engagement with all three levels. That helps us bring issues to the Gurdwara, which are typically run by the elders more, to the professionals who have connections into their professional backgrounds and into institutes, and also the younger generation that sometimes feel frustrated that they're not getting heard. So that, I think that was what some of the purposes and the foundation of the network, and for you to sort of acknowledge that and see that and then come part of it, and I think it's been great. And I guess what's your experience been since the last few months now that you've been working with us?
To be honest, that has been very useful for me. You know, obviously my own kind of learning. I still volunteer with other groups within like Dharm Seva, for example. But I think we're coming to a very, very important time where you mentioned in terms of the elders who've done their part, and almost this handing over the torch kind of thing. And what normally happens is, if you look at the transition of any sort of power, so to speak, even if you look at it in companies, there could almost be this kind of vacuum that comes in there. And I think it's very important in this time wherever there is that vacuum, that the correct decisions do get made. Because if you repeat the problems of the past, you know, there's a strong chance that they're going to happen again. So it's very important that whatever your background, whatever your specialism is, that if you're good in that area and you know you're good, or people tell you that you're good, okay, ego aside, and you can help and influence people, then it's very important that you actually speak to the right people to get that message across. So therefore, in the future, to get that engagement in and to help ultimately Gurdwara were around, well, one of the main purposes around it is for education and to help teach people.
I mean, everyone has that duty and obligation, and certainly those who have a background, professional background in specific fields, I think they have a greater responsibility to actually come back and support the community. Because it's great that we, as you mentioned at the start, that we've invested in education, whether that's law, accountancy, finance, other professions. But actually, those who have qualified and have that skill set, if they don't come back and support the community, then ultimately that's a skill set lost to the community. So there is no wider benefit of that sarbadda pala. So I think it's important. And I think this is a topic that is vitally important. And we got, when we did the Sikh Manifesto and the UK Sikh Survey, we were approached by a lot of people in public health. And I know you, the first time we spoke was around, it would be great if we had this included. And I think there was reasons that it wasn't, and not that it's not an important issue, it clearly is. It was around, I guess, at the time, looking across, because the first time the manifesto had been done, what were the widest ranging issues across the Sikh spectrum. And there are other issues like mental health and such, and disability work. So this is something that we've always been keen to actually work around. And I guess I'm keen to sort of, and from a network point of view, we're always keen to work with those that have the background and the expertise. And I know there's a lot of people do a lot of work and a lot of stuff across many disciplines. And I guess it's great when we have professionals who have done this for many years. So, I mean, it'd be great for you to just touch on your professional background in mental health and public health, and the organizations you've worked for.
Yeah, sure. So, like I briefly said before, I used to work for West Midlands Police as a drug referral worker. So what would happen there was, it was my first sort of introduction into the substance misuse world. And I actually went into this trying to help a friend of mine. So I went in with the mindset of, like, if I learn a little bit of this, I can actually go back and
help him.
Yeah, in an ego way, you know, try and save him and do all of this and that. And it was only through that experience when I went back to him, and he actually sort of, like, I'll never forget it. He actually, like, laughed at my face. So it was like, it was at that point where I realized, I said, the motivations of why I was doing this was wrong. So I need to change the way I was doing it. So therefore, the philosophy of when he's ready, he needs to know I'm there.
I'm there for him.
So I did that for around about 4.5 years. So people coming into getting arrested, they probably have, you know, you're talking about people with severe kind of addictions, you know, committing crime to fund their habit, affiliated with gangs, affiliated with so many different kind of aspects. But again, you're getting, I was getting people from everyday life. You know, I was built up in the stereotype that, you know, everybody in jail, you know, getting arrested is, you know, is a hardened criminal, going to attack you and do all this. And it was the best sort of crash course in life that I actually learned. And from that point, what I started to do then was, within the police, you've got many different kind of departments, but they're not aware of substance misuse issues and things like that. So I got into the kind of training kind of format. I was then started working for the commissioners. So it was the Birmingham Drug and Alcohol Action Team. So they were commissioning all the services that were in Birmingham at that time. So I think that was 18 plus. So you had 18 different kind of providers doing drug and alcohol services within Birmingham. What that did then was, I had to see it from a wider perspective with other kind of, you know, you're building up a strategic kind of thing. You get that vision. I was getting into that bit where I was just thinking about my service was the most important service, but it wasn't. I had to think on a wider point.
And was that service to all sort of victims or offenders, or was it specifically for Sikhs at that time that you
No,
were
it
consulting
wasn't.
on?
Again, it was for everybody.
Right, all,
But
yeah.
what I knew in my own private life, in terms of my social life, knowing that, you know, you go to Punjabi Sikh weddings,
you see
the
that.
accessibility to alcohol culturally within the Punjabi community, all these kind of things. And I never forget when, you know, I was in the office and somebody was talking about weddings, and I think even my own wedding was happening around about that time when I joined. You know, oh yeah, I went to a Punjabi Sikh wedding. There was all this booze there and all this kind of thing, and I was, all of a sudden it clicked onto me saying, okay, is that being reflected in the services that we do?
Yeah.
Is that being reflected in the numbers of engagement? Now, luckily for Birmingham, it was still on that cusp of a wave where it was, all the services were growing, the engagement, more and more people were coming into treatment, which was good. But then I started looking at things nationally, and then started looking at it internationally. So this spawned my own private work that I did on the sort of sideline. So a lot of the times I find it very difficult to my day job and my own. It all just merges in there because that's just it's my obsession really.
Right.
So working for a drug and alcohol action team. Provided me with you know, a really good.
So you must have been got really exposed to the cold face of this problem.
Oh yeah, 100%. Oh, 100%. And then it expanded even more when I got finally into public health, where that was not just looking at where we had the substance misuse. It was looking at other services like health checks, weight, obesity and weight management, all these kind of things. So every time I felt like I was getting to grips with something else, another door will open, and I think, well, you've been naive just thinking about these things. Everything else is related to it. So that was the catalyst in terms of my sort of knowledge around the you know, a wider group of kind of things within there. But my core kind of background and my main interest is around substance misuse.
And I think you touched on some really important points and factors that are really important to the Sikh community. And if we think about it again across looking at our elderly generation, then we talk about substance abuse and drug addiction and alcohol addiction. We'll come on to those in a second. But public health is wider around obesity and again the weight management, typical health management, diabetes, cholesterol. All of these are issues that are, I say, the Sikh community and the Indian community are very prone to, given the diet, probably due to also lack of exercise in the elder generation. They're not doing the real hard work now, given their age. Many have probably retired, and also an impact of the foods that they eat. They're not as fresh as they were. Everything has some kind of different ingredients, which all add to that. So public health and keeping health, well-being and fitness is vitally important, not only for your own family's life and well-being, but also from Gursikhi as well, and Gurbani preaches well-being and keeping the body in its right form. So these are important factors for us, and that's something that sometimes we look at those that are the most vulnerable in society, and that's the problem. Well, actually not. There's everybody could find ways of improving that, and exercise and things like that is also a key message, you think, for a lot of our the Sangat and the views of
yeah, I mean 100% I agree with everything that you said. If you look at just even our body types, the South Asian community, if you're looking from there, you know, we've got one of the highest diabetes rates. Yeah. You know, the link between diabetes and dementia, for example. Right. So, you know, Gobindajit Kaur I think she's from Wolverhampton actually, did a lot of work around dementia-friendly Gordane. You know, I think she'd done a paper on it really, which was really interesting. And I think some other guys in Leeds, I think, done it. You've got, I mean, just going on to the weight management kind of things. If you just look at the diets that what we have, the care and all these kind of things. Yeah. I remember even my granddad, you know, when the dal was being made and that, you
took
know,
a massive
dollop of care,
put it there,
you know, oh, it's not made properly, and, you know, put some more in and all these kind of things. But if you look at their background and what they were doing though, they were coming from manufacturing jobs. Yeah. So the labor intensive kind of job. So whatever they were eating, they were working it out. Yeah. Now we've into that kind of behind a computer desk, behind a computer monitor, and we're not really exercising as much as we
Well,
can.
everyone's got cars now. Everyone's got 2 or 3 cars per household, so no one's walking anywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
and the exercise element has now certainly
trying to get
been
people to have the
limited.
right fruits and stuff. And that. And if you look at the kids side, and this is where the bit where we've got to be even more important, childhood obesity, that's on the increase. Now, it's the education of the parents, because the kids don't make their own packed lunches. It's the parents who put it together. And then one of my own kind of things is like, okay, we're trying to get engagement and people into, let's say, the Gurdwara. So we're saying, okay, come to the Gurdwara, yeah, you can have pizza and chips. You know, where's we need to teach around nutrition and all these kind of things and that as well.
So something like that's good, intentioned to bring children in and have something that will attract them. But actually, we also do need to have a mind on the types of food that we're now serving. Obviously, langar, and I think I've certainly seen in Gurdwara, that's changed in terms of how that langar is prepared, the messaging and the information that goes out from a nutritional point of view. And some of it is legal, so it's a requirement. But I think there is that consciousness that I think there's always more that can be done.
Just do an experiment, Jazz. Think back to when you were at school. How many overweight kids were in your class in that year?
Yeah, won't be many.
Think about it. You drop your kids off at school now. How many overweight kids do you see?
Oh, nice. Yeah, you just see kids that are a lot bigger in size, and that is probably obesity given their young age and their height.
You go to Punjab and that, you almost see the same kind of relationship that's happening there as well. So, as food is becoming more abundance, we've got to try and re-educate ourselves around, well, not just the Punjabi Sikh community, but every community in terms of how they have that relationship with food.
Yeah, and I think your point was made is absolutely valid in that you get used to eating certain foods and you think they're great for you, but your lifestyles have changed. So that food is actually not the most ideal for you given your current lifestyles. And I think that's the bit, that's actually understanding what foods are good for you, based on your lifestyle, based on your movements, based on your physical activities. Because if you're no longer working and sweating an 8, 9, 12-hour shift, then that food you thought was giving you all that energy is actually going to be more to your detriment.
If we look about it in a different kind of angle, let's say I know we're focused around the Gurdwara, but it's a very important kind of facilitator, so to speak, to send out the messages. Let's say that the people doing the seva and volunteering their time and going there are the workforce within that Gurdwara. RSPH, so the Royal Society of Public Health, the NHS, they've done massive piece of work about looking after the workforce. What messages are being cascaded down to all the sevadars there, the grantees, everybody, people doing the seva about looking after their own health? Because that affects the way that they volunteer their time. It promotes good habits as people are coming in and learning from the elder generation about those key messages of how to do this work, how to do it correctly. But your body is one of your biggest tools. If you're not looking after that, it's really going to have it's going to have an impact on the outcome of yourself, the area you're looking after, and ultimately the workforce where you're passing on those messages.
Absolutely. And I think, again, it comes back to the importance of it, and we talked about this isn't age specific.
No.
In that you touched on children in primary schools and in junior schools and in secondary schools with the weight issues and the obesity issues, to middle-aged people around social issues, around substance misuse potentially, and also similar weight and lack of exercise, and working habits have changed. People are becoming, like you said, more sort of stable sitting down work jobs, and also the elderly. So this issue does grow across the generations. I think this is, again, the important role that I guess the Sikh Network can play in terms of its engagement with some of the Gurdwara and the committees around how do we bring that education and understanding to them in a language they can understand, but more importantly, how they can then cascade that down into, like you said, all the sevadars and instill it in Gurdwara committee good practice, but then also be examples for the Sangat who come and see it and actually say, no, this is why we're doing it. And I think that connected with some of the other work that goes on with wider groups is helpful.
I could give you a working example of that, actually. The Public Health England have launched this campaign called One You, which is promoting physical activity. And you could download all the resources from there digitally and stuff like that. So they're trying to make it easier. But they focus on the 40 to 60. So anyone over 20 can do, 18 plus can do this. It's like a 2-minute health quiz. But the most important statistic out of that is between the ages of 40 and 60 years old, 70% of premature deaths, so 70% of premature deaths, people who die before they should, technically, is down to lifestyles. So those are preventable deaths. So thinking about our body types, all the things that we've discussed and what people know about their diets and that as well, that can all can be changed.
And this is the thing when you talk about people who have but life-changing diseases that sometimes are out of your control and even out of the influence of medical science at the time. But these are, like you said, these are lifestyle changes, and 70% is a huge number to say that these are sort of perpetuated issues that can have a detrimental effect on your life. And these are things that actually, the earlier these are raised, the more chance you have of actually correcting and your body, because the human body is amazing in terms of readdressing and recorrecting itself if you make those changes, but you can also cripple it in terms of its recovery as well. And I guess the bit we're going to come on to is probably, again, it's quite a serious issue, and you touched on where you initially started was around substance misuse. And substance misuse, I guess, can come under again a number of categories with alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and unfortunately these are issues that aren't distant from the Punjabi and Sikh community. And I think in our own families there'll be somebody we know, whether historically or whether currently, has either been a victim of alcohol abuse or drug abuse. And I think it's important that we raise these issues and we don't let them be taboo subjects. And some of the work you've been doing is great, and a lot of the work that others do on this subject is amazing and commendable. But talk about some of the things that you've seen from you started this, you mentioned, professionally, and then you've gone into it with that focus and passion to really benefit the Sikh community. Talk about some of the stuff that you've been doing and share it with the views around on the substance misuse.
Yeah, sure. I mean, getting into that kind of just worth reiterating in terms of the importance of it was where I was working at. The Birmingham treatment model, for example, is the largest in Europe, and I was fortunate to be in a position where I was like a lead trainer within that. So I wanted to try and maximize my sphere of influence. I think that's important. Why everybody gets a message, no matter what passion that you believe in, you maximize your sphere of influence to try and help as many people as you can. And one of the things that started to come around was, it was the start of the social media kind of thing, and I was virtually, I'd say that if anything, there's probably about a handful of us who are very active just talking about it. So you could put up a picture of your football team or something ridiculous, and you'd get, I don't know, a social media post might get, let's say, 100 likes or something. You put up something serious relating to about your community and all this and that, and everyone just ignore it. It was just like, just flick the page and forget it. It didn't exist. And then what started happening as it launches, a lot of the channels started to come out. The platforms of the Punjabi Sikh channels have started to come on there. I started going on some of them shows and started just trying to put the message across, saying, look, if you've got a drug and alcohol problem, there's services out there. You don't need to go and pay people to go and do it. You're already
already paying for it through your taxes.
Exactly. So there's NHS services that are out there. There's people provided. This is the best time ever to get treatment because you're not waiting like months and months before, or you don't even have to go to another country to go and get it done. You don't need to go and do all these things. So I was literally trying to say to him, I go, look, stop wasting your money. Stop paying for Kandi Babbe. Stop paying another guy saying to do all of these kind of things. Just go to these kind of services. That was just a simple message there. Then people, as I was seeing during that time, the presence of cocaine started coming quite heavily at Punjabi. I'd say I always terminology it's Punjabi Sikh in that way. Because identity becomes a real issue in that as well. So you got to be careful.
I mean, the thing is it's that the distinction here is that from a Sikh perspective, from a dharmic perspective, that obviously intoxications, alcohol, all of it is not permitted. It's forbidden because of the obvious reasons of you lose control of your own senses. You're not able to then function. But I guess the mix has been that these substances, they don't care who you are. They don't care where you're from. They will attack and attract to all. So I think this is where, and it's been one of those things where, from a cultural point of view, relatively recently, this is an issue which, whether it's the first generations coming to this country, where there's a pub on every corner, to socialise, to integrate, it was started to go to that scene, and then that sort of impinged more on society and our celebrations. But now it's become a populist thing that we have to, who can drink the most, who can smoke the most, who's on what drug.
I mean, I'll make this point and then relate it back to what we were saying before, was as those communities, that first generation, second generation that were coming over, they were very used to, let's say, for example, a farming background. They were very used to that, having that alcohol as being a big presence in their everyday life. They come over to a country working hard, where they find at lunchtime they could go to the pub.
Yeah.
This fitted in perfect with the lifestyle of what they were doing before, and here they were doing that and getting paid for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So the way that the Sikhs, and it's in terms of the Sikh survey, in that where it was almost re-emphasised the point about Sikhs being one of the best ethnicities out there in terms of for integration within the British way of life. That
was an example of that.
Yeah, the society of going to the drink and being social, and the way that the customs were being, the traditions, actually knitted together perfectly. So
that's in a negative aspect.
In a negative kind of way for us, looking at it that way, but as a positive at the time, because they didn't know how this was going to all end out. Country, and then relating back to the drinking, when I've seen there was a cocaine kind of boom, and in order to people to carry on and sustain their drinking and going more and more and more and more, and this was sort of the first time where I started getting a lot of phone calls. As I was getting, they were like, "Oh, Rick, I've celebs, within there, and not your main ones on terrestrial TV, but the ones who
known faces,
that's it. That's a better word, known faces. Rick, I need help from here. Can you sort out my cousin, my sister, my mom, all of these kind of things. And at that time, it started to take a bit of a drain, because I was sort of I felt at that time I was a bit of a one-man band, really. It was another guy in Wolves getting some stuff, but I was getting phone calls at 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. What do I do here? And all I was literally saying, look, I ain't got the resource or the capacity, but signposting that say, where's your local service? We do that. I can liaise between yourself and them, but go into the service and see what can happen. Now, I'm not saying that those services are perfect, but at the moment, it's better than nothing. It's better than going to India, Punjab, getting tied up to a manja, almost in some ways getting battered, or people playing the part in a room and saying that's it.
And just hoping for cure.
And they come out and say, you're looking very well, you stopped using. Yeah, that's because you've been in virtual prison for 2.5 months.
And I think that's an important factor that in terms of the services and the aid to those addicts, it's that always is that self-recognition and admission. Many say is the first step, but also importantly, certainly for our community, is the family understanding of it. In terms of, do they really understand that this isn't something that you can just beat out somebody, or you can, like you said, lock them away and time will disappear out of them. This is something that needs to be addressed, and there are many ways, and Gurbani has a whole approach to this, and we'll touch on that. But the point I think you're making was that there are services out there. This isn't a Sikh or Punjabi isolated issue. This is widespread in the UK. Again, stem from some of that historical cultural setup around alcohol and drug abuse. But something that is related to what we did cover in the Sikh manifesto was around data. Because a lot of services are apportioned based on statistics and data. And from a Sikh perspective, we've had very little, because it stems back that Sikhs aren't recorded in the census as a separate ethnicity. So when you go to your hospital, you go to your local authority, they won't have any data on how many Sikhs are on drug schemes, recovery schemes, how many are recovering alcoholics, how many are entering hospital with this type of symptoms and needs. So they have no data on the community of what our real social and welfare and health and public health needs are. So without that data, we're always fighting a case-by-case basis, as opposed to a real statistical base that we can actually put in front of decision makers, to actually get the right resources that are then specific to the Sikh community's needs. Is that something that you've come across without that?
Oh,
data?
100%. I mean, the very definition of public health is dealing with a population's health. If that population can't be identified, you're struggling.
Yeah.
And this is virtually every interview that I normally say, and relating back to when I first started and getting out there, was that the messages, I was getting tired of saying the same thing again and again. Yeah. And the most important part of that is we need data. It's only with data and academics doing pieces of work, analysing, evaluating it, that you can actually say, okay, these are the needs of the community, of what's happening, these are the trends, here's the evidence to provide it. Once you've got the evidence to provide it, we all got stories of anecdotally, we know this, and this is what was happening. I had anecdotal evidence of, I know this is happening, I could see, but there was no way of transmitting that into, or transferring that into hard evidence, academic
and looking
evidence.
Across the UK to actually extrapolate that out and say, and we saw that firsthand, which is why we launched the UK Sikh survey, because even the points in the manifesto were that clear. Without the quantitative and qualitative data to back it up, policymakers and decision makers would be dismissive. They'd understand the issue, but it wouldn't encourage them to find a solution because they couldn't quantify it. And I think that was the driving force behind the survey, because then you bring an issue with statistical data to say, here's how big it is. And you touched upon the positive contribution of Sikhs that we make in terms of our charitable contribution, 1.2 billion, but also the discrimination that we face in that over 100,000 hate crimes have been reported by Sikhs over the last 12 months. So once you have these kind of statistical data points, it makes it a lot much more harder hitting. And then you can start to work around specific targeted solutions for the Sikh community, because we have specific needs as a community. Our identity, our religion, our culture, our language is all different. So the solutions and the practices and the policies that are in place, whether they're here in the West Midlands or whether they're anywhere in the UK, need to be specific to that community and its needs.
Yeah, I mean, and that sort of replicated itself in the journey. I'm trying to like relate it back to you know from that point where, as more and more people started getting in contact with me and all these kind of things, that data was starting to come through. I was starting to get a bit of an idea of where issues started to, happening, or pockets of information. Now, the average age of somebody coming into treatment is 37 now, approximately 37. Wow. So I'm still way younger than that. Yeah. Okay, maybe yourself is probably but as this data was coming through, and people started going through their own journeys and setting up their own organisations and stuff from there, another panic started kicking in there, which was, hold on a second, people are doing all this extra piece of work, but who's mapping it? And the problem is, if somebody's doing something there, somebody's doing something there, somebody's doing there, someone's working with somebody else, and somebody's bad-minding something else, it starts getting into you start having that problem there, because then people don't know where to go. And when you get that, if people don't know where to go, well, there's NHS services and all this, right? How are they going to know where to go with other support groups? Yeah, we're already a difficult market, so to speak, to engage with and try and get to treatment. Now we've got the additional issue of saying, from there, and are they professional? Is there relevant training? Are there case notes? Who supervises it?
And I think some of these things, again, it comes down to word of mouth. Is that if someone's son or someone's daughter, because again, I think it's important to note that this isn't now just men that are impacted by this. And again, I've been at weddings, I'm sure you have seen many specific cases, which we don't need to go into, but it is affecting women and younger women, and also elder women as well, that the substance abuse, whether that's drug or alcohol, is prevalent in both male and female of the Sikh and Punjabi community.
The older community have been on drugs for ages. I know that sounds a ridiculous statement to say, but prescription medication, think about it. We're a very, very, very medicalised
model.
So, you'd get older Bibby going to the doctors for virtually anything, getting a pill for, let's say, arm ache or something like that.
I know, we're very reliant on antibiotics. You've got a headache, so you want an antibiotic.
Sharing medication. How many people share medication? Who's got that store cupboard at home with every medicine under there?
We share it.
What I'm trying to say is that sometimes there've been overdoses based on prescription, sharing medication. You've got one goalie for your knee. Yeah. Hang on, mine's going. I got two. Okay, so it's not a new problem. It's just that it hasn't been highlighted before. Yeah. Now we've got into the older, with women drinking. That was happening before. It's just that where people are, it's getting easier to
more in the open now.
Oh, 100%. And I think again, underage drinking. How many times was that celebrated?
Yeah.
He's 13, 14, he's had his first pint, all of those kind of things. So all these social issues coming. I've got a friend of mine, and he's got a wedding hall. Mm-hmm. He's done a couple of functions where he's found more cocaine residue in the women's toilets than the men's.
Yeah.
So people coming around and trying to dismiss it and say it's only this one category and it's got to be done there.
And I think it's important to note that although across the wider spectrum, it probably is still a minority, but I think, like you said, it affects everybody, but it might be in varying degrees. Like I said, everybody's on tablets, near enough. So you'll take a tablet for something.
Yeah.
And that's not saying that's bad, but there is levels or degrees of exposure to this everywhere, and everyone's a potential that actually you can become addicted to prescription drugs.
How many people are going to be watching this, and they're doing addictive behaviour?
Yeah.
Meaning by that, cups of tea, caffeine. Yeah. The amount of clients I've had with caffeine.
We're not going to get into stopping tea because Charlie Cup culture, right?
But that's the point, isn't it? Because if it's Charlie Cup culture,
sugar,
then
exactly. I mean, in India, it's diabetes. Sugar with a cup of tea, right?
But if you're let's try and back it up with the evidence and the stats. If we're saying in terms of it's affected every family, I think it was the Guru Nanak University in Punjab at that time, with the information that they disclosed at that time, I think it's gone through loads of discrepancy. We're saying that 73.5%, I think they were looking at the age group of 16 to 25 were addicted to some sort of drug, mainly opioids, so a heroin-based drug. Yeah. Then they came up with a stat of at least 65% in the past year have lost a family member to it or got an addict to it. So these are stats that are just done over there. Now, if we know that people come from Punjab, coming over visiting or staying over here, as soon as they jump on that plane, their addiction doesn't go away.
They haven't left it there.
So when they come over here, how do they engage in any services? Yeah. Or do they not tell? They're secret prescribing drugs themselves. They're buying it off the street. Yeah. Or people from here saying, "Oh, listen, we'll send them back to Punjab. We'll do all of that kind of survey."
And we've seen that.
Get them married off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the classic.
There's other trying to find other cures without looking at the root cause and look at the symptoms. And the point we were touching on is that often it's by hearsay. Oh, so and so's son or daughter was healed or was made better by so-and-so. So they send them there. And it's one of those things that you don't do your own research. And like you said, do the research. Look at the credibility of them. Look at the qualifications. Look at the track record. Look at who they're connected to. And we've got the NHS in this country, and it's probably the greatest institute in this country that we have. Yes, it has some challenges, but ultimately it's practically free healthcare at the point of need for everybody. We have to take advantage of that. But like we talked about earlier, we need to make sure that Sikhs are recognised in the system and we get that data with it. I mean, you touched on the issue of people from Punjab coming here. And I've seen it firsthand where you've got young Punjabis that are sleeping rough, even doing drugs in Gurdwara toilets because it's the only place they can go during the day. And I've seen it in properties that they'll find any space they can to use. And I guess you touched on some statistics. This isn't just a UK problem, but Punjab has been highlighted heavily for many years now, not just over the recent election. But the drug epidemic in Punjab is a serious worry because it's not an organic issue or a social problem that has been injected into Punjab. It's been purposely flooded into Punjab, as was the alcohol following the 80s, in terms of how do you subdue and control a community. But the reasons are there, but actually that hasn't stopped the consumption of it because it was there in plentiful supply, and now drugs are being provided for in some cases, many police officers and senior politicians are involved and have been incriminated in these types of events. So there is a purpose there, but ultimately the victims are the people of Punjab. And you said some of the statistics, but I mean, what sort of work have you touched on and been involved in for Punjab as well?
I mean, it will relate to something that I'll come on to later, but as I was doing getting involved, doing a lot of the stuff, trying to highlight the issue, I just thought, how do they access this treatment? So we mentioned about the NHS being fantastic and stuff, but if somebody enters treatment and goes into something like a mutual aid group, you know, their chances can go of remaining abstinent or trying to come off to about 50% or 40% or more. You know, it is a high statistic. And I just felt that there was nothing there to engage it. So during the time, we went over to Punjab at that time because I wanted to start, there was a piece of work that had been done and I wanted to just film some of the impact that was happening. And I just went from like just in my home village, neighbouring villages, and then speaking to politicians and just general influential people around there. You know, everyone's got a cousin or a contact who's connected to whoever, whatever. Yeah. And I just saw it, sort of witnessing it for myself. And what was happening was, as you've got this rise of disposable income coming in, you know, land was increasing, the prices going on there. You've got then a lack of employment issues. So that again, opportunities. A lot of the people have, especially the males, have left the bend. You know, gone abroad. So there was, again, remember that I was saying about that vacuum. It was automatically created. You then had, I think I remember looking at this one village. There was actually more pharmacy shops than there was actual, the alcohol sort of stuff in there. So everyone's attention is always and all that.
You don't see the dispensaries and
but the dispensaries are everywhere if you think about it, how many they are.
And that's where they're getting it from.
And everybody goes over there to go and get a certain cream or something, go get some pills or whatever. And what you had was this synthetic, so the pharmaceutical companies, they started heavily investing in Punjab. And a lot of their medications, there's a large amount of the people who are addicts out there, and not necessarily addicted to the actual raw organic drug themselves. It's actually their replacements.
And I've seen this, and it's amazing that you mentioned that and seen that, because this is to everyone watching as well. When anyone goes back to Punjab, and I know when I went a few years back, and I was with one of my family members who again was an addict, and you can tell if you grow up in the street, you know how things are. So they just assume that everyone from England doesn't know anything, right? But you could spot certain signs, but he was constantly taking cough medicine, and I mean necking bottles of cough medicine because of the alcohol content, but also the drug synthetic content in a certain cough medicine, and this sort of. They all know, and they'd just be having bottles of that.
I mean, it's a combination that's well known, but I'm not obviously going to say it on here. But it is a trend that's happening, especially in the hip hop industry, and that was around. So again, how people are getting influenced, the technology starts increasing, and I think the borderline of where Punjab and it has I think between. I think the top of Punjab to the bottom, the fencing is something like 450 kilometers or something along the line.
No, I mean it's very clear. I mean the Punjab
is not. It's supposed to be an electric fence.
Yeah.
They only put it on at certain times. So the way that the accessibility, I think, if you threw over a kilo, I think I was reading and I worked, had it account verified. If you threw over a kilo of heroin, it will be sold 12 hours later in Delhi.
You could get it,
it would just travel that way. And so what you have to then look at exactly. So there's transport networks going in, and the opiates there. You know, when you have your painkillers and stuff, your codeine. So there are like legit reasons of why it's needed, but that black market started to get filled.
But again, if you think about Punjab as well, you talked about the dispensaries. There's no assessment. In terms of, you go to a GP, they even to give antibiotics, they will challenge and question you. First, you've got to get an appointment for a start, right? And then a prescription is the control element to get it to these drugs. Whereas in Punjab, you can get, I've been there, you can get the hardest drug straight over the counter for just a few rupees.
And now we're seeing people using cattle. This is one of the things that I've mentioned before, but seeing people using cattle medicine for themselves.
Right.
So I think there was I think it's ACV or RCV, something like that. It's been a bit of a while now. So using it's a respiratory.
The drugs that you would be
it's a respiratory
for your
steroids that they give to
you.
cows.
Yeah.
You know, people using that. So we're seeing, and this is the leveler. It doesn't matter if you've got how much Jameen. It doesn't matter where your background is in that. They're all using in the same part of the brain, hidden away, using it all together.
Yeah. And I think touching on Punjab, and I know there needs to the hope is that there'll be now a much more concerted effort to have government-funded rehabilitation centres, because that was a real limitation. And when you talk to people there, the recovery or going into a clinic is really expensive. They're really far, and again, people with time and access to money and freedom will only fall into the same old traps. It's putting that control mechanism in there. And we hope that the work that gets done on the ground can really address this issue. I know you mentioned Dharm Seva Records, and they're sort of affiliated partner with the network do. And I know Dr. Ramneek Randhawa, who we both know well and work with, has sort of taken what you sort of initially were looking at and that concept and sort of really centered around Gurbani. And that's the powerful of it, actually, that the Gurbani has all the solutions. That we look to doctors, we look to science, we look to the internet to find solutions for whatever remedies or whatever we're feeling. But actually Gurbani covers all of this and more. And he's actually gone back to Gurbani and the source to actually provide you with a roadmap of recovery and how to sort of change your lifestyle. And it's called the affliction model. I mean, talk to a bit about that, because you've been involved in that creation.
The Guru Granth Sahib works in the way of the psychosocial interventions are all within there. So if I give you the problem and then the solution. So the problem was I seen all of this. And I thought I need to get that pathway of those people who have disengaged with the Punjabi Sikh community, the Gurdwara, these institutions, but trying to get back in. But they don't know the bridge to get there, and those institutions don't know the bridge of how to get there.
Connection with community,
So I didn't necessarily care how it was done, but whatever that bridge is, that's the idea. So when I went to various organisations trying to get advice in that, and come it through. And within there, I came up with sort of like a structure, like a sort of not almost like a 5-step, but a five philosophical statements or actions that needed to be done in there. But the repeated sort of feedback I was getting was, how does this relate to Gurbani? Now, obviously, that's not, well, I'm not saying obviously, but you could quite clearly see that my Gurbani is not the best at all. And so I was looking for the person who was able to look at that, transmit that, and then work it out in that way. So I'd come up with a rough model, which I'll probably keep now. And when I was going to the, people around different organisations, it's not their fault. They didn't have the time. They're doing their own kind of things. Or they didn't necessarily know enough about the addiction and so forth. And then I managed to speak with Dharm Seva and Dr. Ramneek Randhawa. And it was a very interesting conversation, because what he was doing, he was from a healthcare background, and he was already doing this.
Homeopathic background.
Homeopathic background. And he was already doing this. And if you ever meet him, he's a very deep kind of guy.
And I don't know, spare 2-3 hours.
When you do it. So when I eventually came to that point, and the way how he was able to take that and then using Bart and that, I think certain parts, deciphering it from a healthcare perspective, he was able to take and create the affliction model within that. And therefore, my Seek to Recover program sort of like not ended, but it was passed on. It was done then, because he was able to do it and actually practice it. So he took this affliction model, took it to India. He's used it on clients in his way. He's taken it in. He's in Dubai. He's doing all that. He's working his own way and the philosophy around it to see how it works. And this was launched last year at my the National Substance Misuse Conference. So this is the first national conference where a Gurbani model that I'm aware of. So the first conference I'm aware of, a Gurbani model was actually used, displayed, and shown.
And I was at that conference, and it's one of the sort of when we first early started talking about this stuff. And that was a conference where, I mean, I was quite impressed in terms of it. We had Public Health UK, NHS, senior advisors, Royal Society, Public Health were there, many major charities, the 12 Steps, and all the rest of it, the sort of those charities that work in this space were present, were speaking. So it was a conference that you would not look out of place in any global public health environment. But actually, like you said, the key speaker and the key message was a Gurbani message in terms of what does Sikhi say about this, and what is the overall message of Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji. And I think that even to Sikhs, it's important that we realise that, because we have maybe forgotten it. But actually, to see the look on others, people of other faiths and no faith, to actually the head nodding and the acknowledgement that actually that makes sense.
Yeah.
And to know that we have that gift within our faith, and it is probably down to a lack of people have that real grounded understanding. But importantly, taking that Gurbani and understanding into a model that can be utilised for an individual. Because sending somebody to say, we'll just read Gurbani, it's still a long way for that individual to take that and then move it forward. But if you can turn that Gurbani, that translation, and make it resonate with them in an operational model, if you like, then that what they're used to in this lifestyle and their work environments, then that's something that really does make a difference, I think.
Very early on, when I first put this thing, put it together, I did a presentation and I was doing it, and somebody come up to me at the end and said, "Rick, how do you respond to somebody where they say, actually, the reason why I'm using it is because of God, it's His fault?" And that really threw me then, because I was working on the assumption that people who are disengaged want to come back into Sikhi and all this stuff. And what Ramnik did was actually create a universal one where that starting base isn't needed, because that relationship, if you want to go back into that power, that spirituality, that almost has to get reprogrammed in again. So the way how he utilized it is nothing that I can ever do. I've just, so to speak, it's
a merger between
I've just lit it and legged it, and he's just put all the things within there, and then the platform in itself, he's been invited to other places to speak about it. But this is and he says it on his own kind of lectures, or he does, to study the Guru Granth Sahib, having all the answers within there and deciphering it and taking it apart. Everybody, his point is, I'm not speaking for him, everybody says that the Guru Granth Sahib's got all the messages, but who's actually just studying it to get the messages out? So he goes, that's the question you got to keep asking yourself every day, and to do that. So yes, I don't mind anybody who's using a spirituality pathway. It may be for them. Other people might use a medical model. That's fine. My point is that if people want to try and get help, the help and support is there. I don't promote anyone. I don't discredit anyone. The most important thing is getting the correct factual information that's in there. And so when I saw that model and I saw the results firsthand as he was working in there, and it was absolutely incredible. I couldn't believe it when I saw it, and that's what I knew. I thought, when I was putting the conference together, it was almost 15 years worth of work that I've put together, like from a starting point to actually put that platform on. All those people who were speaking there were personal contacts that I knew, and influential bodies and people who were there, and to trying to give that platform for that model was essential, and I felt it was complete from that very first time of trying to help my mate to that conference where this model had created. That was the journey that it took me.
But that might have been. But I guess from there, the next steps now started in terms of that journey. So since then we've now opened up, and now between the Sikh network and yourself, and even with Dhamma Seva, we're doing a lot of work in this space. And I know we've been working with the Royal Society for Public Health, and we're looking to do a joint initiative centered around, again, data-driven research and work in the Sikh community. But this is, I think, it's a great recognition and achievement for the Sikh Network to say that the Royal Society of Public Health have reached out to the Sikh Network, and we have these contacts now. We have the experts like yourselves and Kiran, who we'll talk to on a later show, who work in these areas, and collectively, jointly, we can actually produce something that is of need and of benefit to the Sikh community. So these are projects that we'll bring to the audience over the next coming weeks and months. I know you touched on the conference, and I'd just like to end on actually that was the first conference you held, and it was an amazing conference. But it's not the last. It's now you've got the second conference coming up. Tell us the viewers a bit about where they can get the information. When is it?
Yeah, sure. The date is set for 13th of September, 2017. It's at the Birmingham Conference and Event Centre. So at the moment, we have made contact with a lot of again more influential speakers, so to speak, from various organisations, so Public Health England, Ad Action, universities, the Liverpool University, independent consultants. So what it is, it's an opportunity that people who are the leading countries, best in the field, internationally and nationally, that you get a chance to hear what they've got to say. Now, if you're where before was trying to get more people engagement from Punjabi Sikh community, I'm trying to bring everybody together, you know, and open it that way from a professional point of view. So it's a plan that has been done. It's already underway. So the website is www.rsbevents.com. So to get all the information, there's
it's
how
on
to
Twitter,
get tickets.
it's on Facebook.
You can grab me at.
Where do you get tickets from? Is that Eventbrite?
Yeah, it's on Eventbrite. The links are all there. And again, trying to put it so we've got our very own who's going to be speaking on there with a very, very interesting topic that she's never spoken about before. So it'd be very useful.
So, I mean, we come to the end of our show here this week, and again, as we said at the start, that although we didn't specifically cover public health in the manifesto or the survey, it is very related around the data we need is there. But this is a vitally important topic and subject, and it impacts all of us in some way, directly or indirectly. And we've heard about stories, not only does it impact our family and various generations in this country, but also in Punjab. So this is something that this network are committed to, and we've also been in touch and contacted by people in mental health, because it's another important issue, and also those working with disabled charities. To get involved on how do we bring those topics out in the Sikh community. So the Sikh Network is dedicated to this, and will continue to work and partner with these organisations and charities. But again, I'd like to encourage you all to look up RSB events, look at the National Substance Misuse Conference. It's September the 13th at the Birmingham Conference and Event Centre. It's on all the social media, so please do get your tickets and attend and support. And if you know anybody or you're just interested in this field, come and learn about those who are experts in this field and seek their advice, and ensure that whatever path of recovery you're on, it is the best for those. But ultimately, Gurbani has everything we need in life. And again, ultimately, our message is always to connect with Gurbani, learn more about the affliction model. We will bring a show specifically on that with Dr. Ramneek Iqbal, Singh Randawa soon. And I think that's the key message, is that actually let's connect back with our Guru, because all of it stems from there. And that's I think the final message for us on this show, and we'll end it there. Thank you for watching. Keep watching KTV and keep supporting the Sikh Network. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.